What are the key differences between men's and women's vintage clothing styles? Have you ever wondered what sets men's vintage clothing apart from women's? Understanding these differences can enrich your appreciation for vintage fashion and help you connect with fellow enthusiasts and antique dealers. Vintage clothing captures the essence of past eras, showcasing the unique styles and cultural influences of their time. First, let's talk about silhouette and fit. Women's vintage clothing often highlights the body's shape with fitted waists and various skirt lengths. For example, in the 1950s, cinched waists and full skirts were all the rage. In contrast, men's vintage clothing typically has straighter lines and broader shoulders, focusing on a more relaxed fit. The 1970s saw men's fashion featuring wide lapels and flared trousers, showcasing a different silhouette than women's styles. Next, we have fabric and patterns. Women's vintage garments often use a wide range of materials, including delicate fabrics like lace and silk. These pieces are frequently adorned with floral prints or polka dots. On the other hand, men's vintage clothing tends to use sturdier fabrics such as wool and denim, with patterns like plaids and stripes that reflected masculine styling conventions. Now, let's look at decorative elements and details. Women's vintage pieces often feature embellishments like ruffles, bows, and decorative buttons, emphasizing femininity. In contrast, men's vintage clothing usually includes functional details such as pockets and minimal decorative accents, focusing on practicality. Color palettes also differ significantly. Women's vintage fashion embraces a broad spectrum of colors, from pastels to metallics, often changing with the decade's trends. Men's vintage clothing colors are typically more subdued, favoring earth tones and navy, although the 1980s introduced bolder choices for men. Finally, there are functional differences. Women's vintage clothing often includes dresses, skirts, and tailored suits designed to highlight femininity. Men's vintage wardrobes usually consist of suits, trousers, and shirts that prioritize formality or casual masculinity. For collectors and antique enthusiasts, recognizing these differences is essential. It helps in authenticating vintage garments and understanding their historical context. Knowledge of gender-specific design elements aids in dating pieces accurately, as styles evolved distinctly for men and women across decades. By appreciating these distinctions, collectors can curate collections that representing the diversity of vintage fashion history. Understanding the key differences between men's and women's vintage clothing styles not only enhances your knowledge but also connects you with the antique and collectible community.